If you're having a hard time deciding if you should get a 365, maybe this can help. I like to know where people stand so I know how to treat you accordingly.
Baby trying to do it, I'm just doing me. I be working hard and they just want it free.
Be competitive with yourself. Hey, what's going on? This is Jsean for another pickup. Here we had the P365x from SIG Sauer. So I like to label myself a newbie. I'm just your average Joe when it comes to this. I'm just sharing my experiences on my level with others who may also understand and relate to my particular perspective. Have firearms for protection, sports purposes, and also like to collect them as I enjoy and I respect them. If you're interested in the specs, I'll throw some stuff on the screen. Other than that, here's my personal experiences. The longer grip, capacity, and being red dot ready was the determining factors for me to go with the 365X over the original 365. The XL is only slightly longer, but I opted against that and stuck with the hybrid of the three. So the first thing I want to talk about is how it feels. So for me, it feels very nice in my hands particularly, but in the beginning when I held it, felt that the bottom of the grip angle was a little awkward. I don't have large hands, but even so, I was not sure how I felt about that. It just felt a little awkward at that moment. Slide release was also a bit harder to press, and I'm not sure if that actually was hard or the release itself was just too small. The shape was awkward for me to push. The grip angle itself feels nice, and the shape and width feels a bit natural and secure, not too boxy, not too fat. It felt pretty perfect for me. So I felt the proportions of the grip and the length feel very proportional to me, if that makes sense. Once I took it to the range, I realized the slide release that I talked about a second ago never was actually a real issue, and neither was the bottom of the grip angle in real life. If anything, I feel the grip angle helps with less printing when concealing in the place that I carry. So my personal daily carry is the 43X MOS. So on my level, it wasn't a huge difference in any particular direction that made me lean towards any of them. With that being said, many like the trigger and the grip angle on the SIG, while others have an issue with the angle on the Glocks and their triggers. It's all personal perspective, and while I do feel the angle difference compared to my other firearms, me personally, it doesn't bother me enough to actually make any real difference in my personal life. So as far as dimensions and overall size, it's very similar to my 43X. I still find it very slightly more easy to conceal than the 43. The barrel length to me doesn't really make a noticeable difference, but the grip length, that's just my personal perspective. Overall, it is a slightly smaller piece than the 43X. I like how the SIG also holds 12+1 over my 43's 10+1, and I'm aware of third-party options for the magazine alterations and options for the 43 in general, but I decided to opt out of those for my particular reasons. So I originally intended to get the Hellcat Pro to add to my 43 for a slightly larger size and capacity to kind of maybe potentially replace the 19 that I have, MOS Gen 5. So unfortunately, they just sold it when I got there. So I ended up deciding to revisit the 365 because of that. And I found the X to be more of a good balance or compromise for me, as I only wanted larger if it also held a bit larger magazine capacity and being more than just two more. So at the time, I wasn't even aware for the macro options, but in retrospect, I'm still happy with my decision, and I'll most likely still add the Hellcat Pro at some point down the line. I also have a 19 Gen 5, like I said, the MOS, but I don't actually prefer that over my 43 despite the larger magazine capacity. I definitely don't like carrying it. For some reason, it just feels like short and stubby. I don't really like how the grip feels on my hand. So I'll take the Hellcat Pro over that, which sort of was my original intentions anyway. The 19 in my collection is also sort of redundant. I also have a Gen 5 45, and it actually feels better on my hands even though the grip is bigger. I guess because it's longer and it just feels more balanced and proportional to me. For some reason, just with my personal preference, it just feels better to me. I don't carry that one either, but in general, I just prefer that over the 19. So even though at times I do carry something like the FN or the Walther, it feels slimmer to me for some reason overall, and I just prefer that over the 19. For me, the 19 is my least personal favorite. I've seen people compare the 19 compared to the Hellcat, compared to a 43, because in some dimensions it is similar, but to me, it's just awkward shape, and it feels a little bulky for me personally, for some reason. To each his own, everybody will be different. Just keep that in mind. So as far as shooting, I found the 43 and the 365 actually to be very similar. None felt really more snappy to me than the other in my personal experience, and I tried different grain 9mm rounds, and it was so subtle, it didn't stick out to me, basically. If there was a difference, which I'm sure there was, it wasn't enough for my purposes and my use that it was going to be a deciding factor. So the 365 gives me a slightly smaller footprint, like I said, while also adding a few rounds, which is a bonus without the third-party options. In the end, hold them both, rent, shoot them both to see if those differences are actually important or they matter to you, because for me, they don't. So for me, they're similar to a point where it's just which one do I prefer. When I want even smaller, I go with the 365. And also when I want a few more in the magazine, I'll go with the 365. While they feel and shoot somewhat similar, they still feel different to me though, like they have their own personality, if that makes sense. So it won't make too much of a difference in which one I choose for the day, but since the functionality is similar, I'll just choose whichever one I'm in the mood to carry. So as far as the cost is concerned, I saw it online for $600, but I paid $650 plus tax from one of my local shops. Maybe I paid a little more. I'm not really sure. I wasn't aware until after the fact. And keep in mind, I'm no financial advisor to you. Unless the price is astronomical, I tend to look at the price last. That may sound crazy to some people, but just hear me out for a second. So I like to know what I want first, and then if I find I need or want whatever it is, I'll make way for the cost. I don't mind spending more if it means being satisfied and me getting what I actually wanted instead of settling due to reasons that I could have actually worked out versus, say, a gun that just doesn't have something that I need or wanted on it. So yes, money is important, very important actually, but keep in mind that every person will buy what they feel is worth it to them. There are so many people out there with tight budgets. It's not just you or him or me or whoever else. And everybody has spent something sometime in their life that they technically couldn't afford or shouldn't have afforded at the time. They may wait for whatever they actually wanted. That's my point. So if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. So I'm not saying be irresponsible or make a habit of blow past your budget, but in the end, you'll be stuck with it. So get what you actually want. If you're hearing what I'm saying and you're thinking to yourself, well, I settled for the 365 because I didn't get what I wanted or whatever for the Hellcat. The 365 actually costs more than the Hellcat by a little bit. I just found a place for it and I'll still get the Hellcat because that's what I also want. So my experience with it being sold just made me revisit the 365 because prior, I pretty much didn't even give it much of a thought and I kind of wrote it off. At the end of the day, I'm happy with my purchase. In my experience, most will only complain when spending a lot of money and then it being less than what you actually wanted. If you get what you want and you spend a bit more than what you wanted, just like when those PlayStations came out, they wanted the PlayStation. They played higher than retail for it, just like me. I never complained about the money once I spent it. I got what I wanted out of it at the end of the day. Likely even appreciate it even more due to how much you had to shell out. So either way, to each his own on that particular reason. It's for your personal choice, your personal preference, and how you see and feel about it. All right, so back to the point. So the option for red and green dots are both there between the 43X MOS and the 365X and the XL, but the sights are better on the 365 for sure. For red dots, I personally prefer Hollisons, and I realize that I prefer red over green, even though I have both, but I have both because I didn't know what the difference would be. I had to experience it for myself, just like you have to experience everything for yourself. So some say certain ones are easier to see in certain conditions, and I would have to agree with that, and also depending on the background. They also say if you have astigmatism, it can affect it as well, and I have astigmatism in my right eye, and for some reason I realized that I actually prefer the red dot. So the last thing I'll say is while the internet is informative, take it with a grain of salt and find out for yourself. All it takes is for one negative review to make you question every single thing. Those type of comments are magnified, and it also almost kept me away from the SIG myself before. So just weigh the pros and the cons for your needs and your wants and make the best decision that you can make for yourself. If anything I said helps, then use that for yourself, and it doesn't, then that's fine too. I just want to say thanks for stopping by, and with that being said, make sure you do everything at top level, at your top level, and remember, you're in no competition with anybody except yourself, so make sure your next move is your best move, or at least your better move. Till next time, later.